Good morning or good afternoon, and welcome to this conference. Welcome to this conference of presentation of the report realized by Ce.S.I and the Italian Minister of Foreign Affairs. The conference presentation is engaging ASEAN, Italy and Japan cooperation in Southeast Asia. And as I said, this presentation of the report was realized with the financial support of the Italian Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, and in particular with the support of the WAP, Analysis, Programming Statistical and Historical Documentation Unit. This conference is very timely, and it was very important for us and for our speakers and contributor of this report, because permit to emphasize and to analyze the role of the relation between Italy and Japan in Southeast Asia, and in particular analyzing the connection with ASEAN, and at the same time to share some best practices with other countries and other experience in order to perceive and permit to consider the importance of ASEAN in our dynamics. And for explain these issues, I will introduce my colleague and speaker of this discussion, starting from Mr. Tiziano Marino, Senior Analyst Ce.S.I and Head of Asia Pacific Desk, Mr. Fusanori Iwasaki, Director for Policy Research of the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia ERIA, and Mr. Nguyen Anh Duong, Director, Department for General Economic Issues and Integration, Central Institute for Economic Management, CIEM. Thank you for participating in this discussion and for highlighting our perspective in this conference. Before we start, I would share some thought and opinion with Mr. Andrea Cofelice, Analysis, Programming, Statistical and Historic Documentation Unit, in order to explain the importance of this conference and the role of Italy in not only in this conference, but in general in the ASEAN region. Please, Dr. Cofelice, the floor is yours.
So thank you very much, Mr. Dentice, and thank you very much for inviting me for having this day, and also to all the distinguished speakers, which I'm very looking forward to hear their presentation today. Well, basically, it's always a pleasure for me taking part in these kinds of discussions, which I believe can benefit greatly the strategic reflection here at the Ministry. Indeed, an important part of the mission of the Policy Planning Unit, which is the unit where I work for, is indeed to encourage as much as possible the exchange of ideas and the interaction between the world of research and diplomacy. Indeed, we see it as a sort of cross-cutting process that can take place at every level of the Ministry to promote a culture of openness, debate, and creative ideas. This is because we really believe that critical thinking needs a plurality of voices and perspectives. So the function of my unit, of the Policy Planning Unit here at the Ministry, is also to support the Ministry decision-making process with alternative proposals and ideas. We think that having a conversation on topics we are confronted in our daily work with experts that study those same topics from a very different angle is incredibly useful for us. Combining these two perspectives is a beneficial exercise that helps us to broaden the scope of our usual mindset. So we try to promote this strategic goal through basically a dedicated funding instrument, which, as you all know, is an annual call for research projects on international issues, of which this project is a beneficiary too. We have just recently closed a quite hard evaluation process. This year we have witnessed an unprecedented number of proposals. We are glad to see that there is an increasing interest from many Italian think tanks and academic realities, even if this means that it creates a lot of much difficult work for us, given especially our limited amount of fixed resources. One of the strategic goals here is to foster, as I said, a dynamic and diverse think tank ecosystem supporting the decision-making process of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We are really pursuing the affirmation of a competitive logic aimed at improving always more scientific quality. For instance, we assign additional scoring to projects with national and international partnerships. Partners will represent an added value for a project because they not only offer different points of view, very relevant if they come from the studied region, but they are also beneficial to think tanks themselves due to increased networking opportunities. What I just said is indeed very well known to our partner from Ce.S.I, that has always promoted partnerships and international collaborations as a core part of their research project. And I think this is a very brilliant intuition, because if you really want to grasp the meaning of the many systematic changes in the international order, we need to enlarge our point of observation. This is especially true for the East Asia region, where security challenges and economic interests at stake are really reshaping the global landscape, making it a key region to understand how new trends unfold at the global level. So we have particularly appreciated the report that we have received and that will be discussed here today, since it offers a very useful and original perspective for our foreign policy in terms of an analysis of our bilateral relation with a strategic partner, that is Japan, but clarify our practice.
Sorry, Dr. De Felice, we have a problem with your microphone.
Now you can hear?
No, it's very loud.
I'm trying to...
Not bad.
Not now. I'm trying all the options.
It's the same.
Now this is my last.
Well, this is the problem with technology, but it's normal. Well, try to retake your point, and in general, we try to understand your discussion. Please continue. No.
No, nothing.
No, nothing.
If you want.
Okay.
Now,
in this moment, yes.
I will move.
No.
So I was just trying to clarify the importance of having an analysis combining both bilateral perspectives, that Japan relations, putting within a broad multilateral framework characterized by the present ASEAN region. As far as the first aspect is concerned, as you all know, Japan has recently agreed to upgrade their relationship to a strategic partnership, which includes an enhanced multi-faceted cooperation in the fields of security and defense, economic ties, and cultural synergy. So the honeymoon between two countries is expected to last for a long time in this perspective. But
now we have the same problem.
I'm trying to go. Does it work better now?
No, now nothing.
Better?
Okay, now is better.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm very sorry for this. I don't know.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, yesterday I took part in another web seminar and everything worked properly, so I don't know why this morning we are unlucky. And
It's okay, it's okay.
Okay.
Please.
So yeah.
No, we have another way the same problem. Please, Dr. De Felice, try without their pods. Only using the microphone of your PC. No. No. It's the same. No. Please, we can try to retake your intervention after the other speaker. Okay. Okay, sorry for this problem, but as I said, the technology sometimes create this problem with connection. But I leave the floor to my colleague, Dr. Marino, in order to present the importance of this study, and maybe we try to regain the thought of Dr. Cofelice. Please, Tiziano. The floor is yours.
So I hope you can hear me. Good morning, everyone. I start saying thank you to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, of course, and also to the colleagues with whom we had this collaboration. So I will start saying a few words about the structure, or better, the idea behind this research project. The project, the title of the project is Engaging ASEAN, Italy-Japan Cooperation in Southeast Asia. And this is because the project aims to somehow explore how Italy and Japan can be partners in supporting the development of Southeast Asia. So the decision to look at how Japan engages with the region stems from the fact that Rome and Tokyo share fundamental values, an international alignment, just as Dr. Cofelice was saying a few minutes ago. And this is evidenced by common participation, for instance, in major international forums. I'm thinking about the G7 or the G20, among the others. Moreover, on the occasion of Prime Minister Kishida's visit to Rome, Italy and Japan agreed at the beginning of the year, in January 2023, to elevate their relationship to the rank of strategic partnership. Also, Japan has been a privileged partner of ASEAN for many years and now. And for this reason, its ability somehow to develop economic and trade relations, and also its role in regional cooperation and development policies, deserve to be analyzed. Wherever it is possible, and this is like another aim of the project, the action and the strategy of Japan toward ASEAN as a region, ASEAN member states, should be mirrored or better replicated. So for these reasons, mainly, we decided to start the project by analyzing what are the best practices used by Japan to structure its cooperation with ASEAN member states. Tools, business, also, I see there is no audio. Ah, no, okay, sorry.
It's okay.
That's okay. So tools, business practices, and financing instruments are the elements our colleagues at the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia have focused on. And the Director for Policy Research, Iwasaki, will tell you about it like in a few minutes. So Japan's approach to East Asia region, to Southeast Asia region, was then related, or better, we can say like compared, to Italy's external action in the area, in order to better define it, to better structure it, and also, wherever it is possible, to strengthen it. Indeed, the growing global relevance of the region and Italy's willingness to explore new opportunities for economic but also commercial or political cooperation with the region and with ASEAN are at the very core, at the heart of this research project. So later, after analyzing Japan, of course, we proposed two specific case studies, including one on Japan-Vietnam relations, which Director Nguyen will tell us about. The objective, once again, was to identify what has worked and what has not in relations between Tokyo and Hanoi, and then try to reproduce, adapting them to the Italian case, to adapt like these best practices, all the best practices that have had a real positive impact on Vietnamese society and economy. So the same approach, we adopted it also in carrying out the study developed by Alexandru Victor Fordea on Japan-Thailand relationship. So we can say that on the one hand, therefore, there is a relevance of the Italy-Japan relationship, while on the other hand, there is the importance for Italy to deepen ties with an extremely crucial region such as ASEAN. This is even more true today because the recent political and strategic tensions that are somehow, we can say, reshaping the system of international relations linked to COVID-19 health crisis, of course, but also I'm thinking about the Russia invasion of Ukraine, or even like the cooling of relations between China and the United States. All these elements, all these happenings, all these situations have put ASEAN somehow in the spotlight. Indeed, Southeast Asia is at the heart of the Indo-Pacific, which is a region of growing interest for global security dynamics, and we know that also the strategic dynamics of the Indo-Pacific are somehow related with what is going on in Europe these days, in the last year and a half. But Southeast Asia is also a region which is increasingly important for Italy. Now I'm thinking, for example, of the Italian vessel Morosini, who made a port call in Ho Chi Minh City last May. But I can also mention recent state visit of the Italian government in India or China, just to stress out more like this point. And I'm mentioning this like while there is an ongoing G20, which like again our government will have bilateral relations, bilateral meetings like with the regional actors. So when we think of the Indo-Pacific, therefore, we must pay attention to ASEAN. Because ASEAN is an exceptionally dynamic region, rich in human culture and also natural resources. With the world, we talk about like the third largest population in the world. We are mentioning an area in which like 33% of the population is made up of young people. And also ASEAN is one of the most important drivers of Asian growth as a whole. So in 2020, the combined GDP of all member states made ASEAN probably the world's fifth largest economy. Then, of course, like somehow with the COVID I'm talking about what happened, like what was like the situation before the COVID, and then perhaps after the COVID crisis, things changed a bit. But the real meaning, the real sense of what I'm saying is still there. I mean, the region is there, and it's a dynamic region, and it's like really, really an interesting region for many reasons. So understanding the importance of ASEAN, Italy began to forge relations with the organization, and already back in 2015, after President Mattarella visited the region, Italy-ASEAN Association was created. Also, this process of engagement with ASEAN continued over the years, and in 2017, the high-level dialogue on ASEAN-Italy economic relations became the benchmark somehow event for strengthening economic and strategic ties between Rome and ASEAN member states. So these initiatives favored an expansion of Italian exports to ASEAN countries, which increased by almost 50% between 2009 and 2016. And at the same time, imports also grew, reaching $8 billion over the same period. So finally, in September 2020, relations between Italy and ASEAN were formalized, with Rome being granted the status of ASEAN development partner. And so Italy's determination to increase cooperation with ASEAN is even stronger today, as this is linked somehow to the geostrategic relevance of the region and the strategic relevance that Southeast Asia, as I just said, is acquiring internationally. But in order to grow, and this is something we repeat to ourselves continuously, in order to grow, one must also be able to learn. And so Japan, which has a deep relationship with the region, historically rooted, can offer Italy new perspective for regional engagement. So over years, for instance, Tokyo has developed several ad hoc instruments to frame cooperation with ASEAN, an attitude that Italy can try to replicate somehow. Finally, Italy should work also together with Japan for the creation of a free and open Indo-Pacific that also serves, we believe, ASEAN member state interest. Last but not least, Italy, together with the European Union, can play also an important mediating role in the face of possible tensions in the broad Asia-Pacific region that would have a negative impact on ASEAN countries and, of course, like on ASEAN people. And I'm thinking about like the most vulnerable. So for all these reasons, we felt that it was interesting and somehow timely to develop this kind of project. And I again like thank you my colleagues for the effort, and also like for the obstacles we came together, and for like their contribution that was crucial for us in order to achieve our goals and our aims. So now I leave the floor to my colleagues who will present the results of their work, and I thank you everybody again.
Thank you, Dr. Marino, for your thoughts, for your interesting points. Before I share the floor with our speaker, I will try to recover again the precedent message of the Dr. Kofelice. Dr. Kofelice, can you hear me?
Yes, I do, and you can? Can you hear me now?
Now,
okay, that's great.
Now
I'm sorry,
it's
I
perfect.
moved to my personal device. Probably the line here at the ministry are quite busy this morning, and they're not working properly. That's why. Now I think that the problem is.
As I said, the technology
Okay.
sometimes is a solution, but sometimes not. Anyway, please, Mr. Dr. Kofelice.
Thanks. It was really it's useful and interesting hearing to the presentation by Dr. Marino, because he clearly defined a picture of our. I got especially the final part of his presentation dealing with our relationship with ASEAN, which is I totally share. I would just like to a little bit expand also this picture, underlining not just the economic ties, which is the part of the presentation that I grasped. So I don't know if he mentioned also other points, but our relationship with ASEAN is very multifaceted, in the sense that we also point to other ties, including political security, social-cultural development, cooperation with ASEAN, especially because as a genetic component, in a sense, of our foreign policy, pointing at regional organizations as a factor of stability, of a factor of development within a specific area is fundamental to us. We always look at the promotion of regional organizations, drawing on our experience of a partner of the EU, in a sense to reach all these goals. So, for instance, in the political security area, just mentioning few aspects to give you a broader overview. Italy has organized several capacity building initiatives, both on the prevention of transnational organized crime, as well as on the protection of civilians within the United Nations peacekeeping missions from 2020 to 2022. So this is part of our engagement with ASEAN. In terms of social-cultural cooperation, we have recently funded projects for over 3 million euro for scientific cooperation, scholarships, and traineeship from ASEAN member states. Especially, we are committed for financial support for archaeological cooperation in Indonesia, Vietnam, Myanmar, and Thailand. And finally, in terms of also development cooperation, our agency has been assisting and monitoring many projects in the Philippines, Vietnam, dealing with peace building, conflict prevention, agriculture, and also statistical capacity building. So these are several aspects that give substance to our cooperation with ASEAN member states and the regional organization. So you can imagine receiving a report that is able to connect these two aspects, the bilateral relation with Japan and multilateral relations with ASEAN, for us was very, very important. And so we are grateful to our partner from Ce.S.I and to all our distinguished speakers from international research institutes that gave us these useful insights. Now I'm just would like to stop here because I'm very, very forward to hear your, in a sense, recommendations on how, which is the best way to improve our relation with Japan, given this broader context, because listening basically is a very important part of any public diplomacy effort. So I'm here to listen to your recommendations, especially on how Italy could be able to implement our relationship, which are the most important fields that you, in your perspective from the region, may think that are fundamental to us, and we will try to give a follow-up on this here at the Ministry. So thank you very much for your presence here, and again, sorry for all the technical problems that we are experiencing so far. Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Dr. Cofelice. And maybe with Dr. Marino, we try to respond to our insight invitation in the last part of this conference in order to present some recommendation and best practices in this sense about Italian experience and also Italy-Japan experience in the engagement of ASEAN. And for this, I will present one of the two other contributor of this report, and in this sense, Dr. Fusanori Iwasaki, that write his contribution with his colleague Keita Oikawa. And please, Mr. Fusanori, you have the floor, you have the talk, okay. And you can talk about the role of Japan in this engagement with ASEAN, please.
Yes, thank you very much for your kind introduction. And my name is Fusanori Iwasaki, and I'm working in the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia area based in Jakarta. So our research institutions was established in 2008 under the framework of the ASEAN plus 6 member countries. So we are the international organization, and also the main agenda of our work is to do economic research and also the policy analysis for the ASEAN's regional integration and also the economic development. So yeah, again, thank you so much for the Ce.S.I to invite me to present today about the maybe my role is to explain the Japan stance and also the Japan and ASEAN 50 years friendship and cooperation. So I'd like to start by using my presentation materials. So let me share my screen first. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, we see perfectly.
Okay, so let me start. Yeah, now I did a presentation mode. Is that okay for you, the size?
Okay, please.
Okay, yeah. So today I'd like to talk about the ASEAN and Japan, the relation and the heart-to-heart diplomacy and heart-to-heart tide. So firstly, I'd like to pick up some points that I will discuss today. So as you know that, and the Japan and ASEAN has a 50 years history, but the relation were not a linear development, and Japan and ASEAN had many challenges to overcome and become stiff and solid and concrete cooperation and collaboration in the recent years. And Japan also respected and upheld the ASEAN status in the regional architecture, and also including the economic partnership agreement bilaterally. And also that we need to raise that the topics of the several challenges which are raised by the firm survey done by ERIA, including the trade and the human resource development issue. And the fourth one is in the ASEAN and the Japan 50 years anniversary, the both parties can collaborate in the field of digitalization and the circular economy, or in other words, the sustainability issues. And finally, the ASEAN and Japan co-creation vision, which was released by an ASEAN and Japan, mainly developed by the Japanese economic ministry, named the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, which is the important policy document, will be a guiding document for the 50 years anniversary and beyond. So sorry that I put many words in the one pages, but let me summarize these pages. So 2023, this year is very important for the Japanese diplomacy, because Japan has chair of the G7, and also that the Japan faces the 50 years anniversary, and the Prime Minister Kishida stated that the Japan will take a role to connect the strengths and the partnership between the developed countries and the developing countries, and which is so-called nowadays the global South. And Secretary General of ASEAN also raised the several issues of the topics, the innovation and people-to-people or cultural collaboration, and the humanitarian assistance, disaster management in the face of the 50 years anniversary. And then Japan and ASEAN will formally elaborate their ties to the comprehensive and strategic partnership in the upcoming special summit in December. So, however, as I said, the relationship of two parties has not always been smooth over the past 50 years. So let me look back on the history very briefly, and what kind of the collaboration could be necessary for the 50 years and beyond. Let me summarize briefly about the history, 50 years history. And Japan's economic development assistance just started after the World War II. Although that Japan at that time these economic development assistance is the post-war reparations. And then in the 1960s, ASEAN was established, and in the face of the just after the first and the second ASEAN summit in 1976 and 1977, and Japan formally started the relation, and the Prime Minister Fukuda Takeo at that time released the basic policy document for the ASEAN and Japan called Fukuda Doctrine, which emphasizes on the heart-to-heart relationship between two parties. And then, but the actual collaboration, as I explained, that before the 1970s, so that the Japan and ASEAN's collaboration is kind of like economic development assistance, or the so-called the aid policy. But now, gradually change that the stance from the aid policy to the foreign direct investment or trade policy in the 1980s, which was raised by the yen's appreciation by the Plaza Accord in 1985. So then that the Japanese FDI, foreign direct investment, towards ASEAN countries drastically increased. And then after that, Ministry of International Trade and Industry, MITI Japan, proposed the Industrial Development Plan in ASEAN, and also reinforced the network of the businesses, activities within the ASEAN region through the by utilizing the ASEAN Free Trade Area, which was established in 1992. So then, 1980s and 1990s, so the Japan and ASEAN developed the business relationship raised by the Japanese FDI. And then, after the Asian financial crisis in 1997, 1998, and 21st century, so ASEAN and Japan's collaboration become formalized by concluding the economic partnership agreement, same as the free trade agreement. And nowadays move into the mega FTAs, such like Trans-Pacific Partnership like TPP, and also the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP. And also, ASEAN also developed the community building. And finally, so ASEAN established the ASEAN community in 2015. So this is a rough development of the ASEAN and Japan. And the very important point is that, the Japan's stance is Japan always try to, keep the stance to the ASEAN to, respect and uphold the status of the ASEAN centrality, or the, ASEAN-centered multi-layered regional architecture, something like the free trade agreements and the RCEP and the ASEAN Regional Forum, or the APEC, or some other things. So then ASEAN should be centered in the various regional architecture, and the Japan try to respect Japan did not try to override this mechanism, but to maintain and strengthen the partnership. So that Tokyo's stance Dr. Marino and Dr. Coferici already mentioned, so that the Tokyo's stance is very clear how to maintain and reinforce the ASEAN-led mechanism and how to collaborate, strengthen the collaboration, and Japan also get some kind of a return from the regional economic development. So that is at least that the Japanese government, the Tokyo's the stance for within this 10 years. And finally, so that's I already wrote that the example of the development of the RCEP negotiation. But as I explained that the many Japanese companies are working in this region, so then that some of the challenges still remained in the ASEAN region. We did the kinds of the business environment survey last year. So then this is a part of the result of the study. So at first, I'd like to show that the difficulties of applying the favorable tariff through the economic EPAs or free trade agreement. This graph shows that the companies how difficult of the company's selection of the necessary or appropriate economic partnership agreement or the free trade agreements. So as put the information at the note part. So for example, that the Singapore case. So the more than 52 companies, 52% of the respondent feels some kind of the difficulties, but the 47% not feeling the difficulties of the applying the FTAs. But in the case of the Malaysia, unfortunately, only the number of the N is 7. But Thailand or Indonesia and the Philippines, they are still remain high level, more than 70% of the companies feel that some kind of the difficulties of selecting the which EPA, which free trade agreement is suitable for their businesses. The second is the unexpected cost due to lack of custom operation standard or applying harmonization system. So Singapore is unfortunately less than 50%, but unfortunately the Thailand and Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam is more than 70%. So still remains that's the kind of the business environment issues. And this is a time-consuming manual or on-site procedure due to the unclear or unofficial custom procedures. So Singapore is less than 50, but others are more than 80% or so. And one of the and this is the other part of the farm level survey, farm level questionnaire survey that So this is the type of the human resource insufficient to achieve their business growth. So many companies, more than 80%, reply that in the ASEAN region, so there are lack of the kinds of the higher skill middle management class workers. These are very limited to maintain their or strengthen their businesses in the region. So what is the skills of the middle management is the leadership and also the strategy development or business modeling and planning, business ideation, business or operation improvement, and the operation on the infrastructure development. So these are the higher five five categories of the higher rank. And then, so that's a bit take a time to explain it, so that let me skip. But you know, there are some difficulties of hiring and training new graduate and professionals. So let me summarize that there is still a lack of smooth and trade procedure and difficulties of the EPAs and FTAs, and also still lack of the high skill middle management workers for manufacturing sector in particular. So the challenges is that you know, how to utilize the smooth you know, kinds of trade procedure by utilizing the digitalization or so on, and also that how to consider the you know, our economy to make it much more circular rather than the linear type economic development in the region. So sorry that I put many information here, but yeah, let me skip here. And finally, I would like to show this. This is the document of the ASEAN-Japan Economic Co-Creation Vision, still working draft, and it will be released in this December. And this is the 4 pillar of the policy implication of the ASEAN and Japan co-creation. One is the balancing diversity and inclusiveness in the sustainable development. Second is strengthening the cyber physical connectivity. The third is promoting open innovation across borders. And the fourth is building an ecosystem and co-creating dynamic human capitals. So then, in the next 50 years of cooperation, ASEAN and Japan should seek the multi-layered cooperation in the areas of the government, public, private, and business and civil society, as well as the individual level in the various issues. So let me conclude. The history of the 50 years of the ASEAN and Japan. So ASEAN centrality and the Japan cooperation. This is the key point, I think. And then the second one is that to achieve the much higher growth of this region, so middle management workers, abundant middle management workers are necessary for this region. And third, the ASEAN and Japan Co-Creation Vision Initiative will be raised for new cooperation beyond 50 years in this December. Yeah, thank you so much, and I'll stop here now.
Thank you, Dr. Iwasaki, for presenting us the Japan initiative in the ASEAN region and for underline the different insight about the Japanese initiative in the region. Very, very interesting. And in this sense, I will try to reflect also about another country and another role in this sense, like Vietnam. And for this, it will be very interesting to hear the perspective of this country about the presence of Dr. Nguyen Anh Duong. Sorry for the pronunciation, but I hope to explain very well, or maybe better, your name. Please, Doctor, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon again. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Given the agenda, I'm trying to be very brief, and let me just share the slide first. So can you all see it?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay. So the topic of my presentation is about the past decades of cooperation between Vietnam and Japan, and some of the perspective that we have from our working experience. And I think just a bit of the background, since we start the economic reforms in 1986, we start to focus on our reforms in 3 pillars. The first one is to build a market economy by the transition of the institutional reforms. And the second one is the macroeconomic stabilization, trying to stabilize the inflation rate, the price increase. And I think it's a timely topic now for your country over there when we're seeing commodities price hike across the various parts of the world now. But the last one is about promoting the economic cooperation and integration. And the key essence of all these reforms are first to broaden the economic opportunities for Vietnamese stakeholders, including the enterprises and the people. But the second one is to build the capacity for to realize those economic opportunities. And so I will try to argue that Japan has been one of the most important partners in Vietnam in terms of both aspects. First, we work together to increase the economic opportunities for Vietnamese stakeholders. But the second one is to build the capacity to realize the opportunities. And indeed, we worked together since 2000 in the past decades. And in 2014, we already established the extensive strategic partnership. And now we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of bilateral diplomatic relations. So I'm trying to focus on the 4 areas of best practices in bilateral cooperation between Vietnam and Japan. And the most important one is the negotiation of the trade pacts or the trade agreements. Indeed, we have the comprehensive economic partnership between ASEAN and Japan in the summit in October 2003. But after that, we start to work together. And originally, Japan wanted to start out with an FTA negotiation with ASEAN as a whole. But over time, Japan started to recognize that ASEAN member countries are very heterogeneous in terms of different development level, in terms of culture, in terms of economic needs and economic policies and the management approach. And that's why it became imperative to change the approach. So Japan started the negotiation with each ASEAN member states, but individually, and then once they complete the FTAs, they started to have the FTA for ASEAN with ASEAN as a whole. So Vietnam and Japan had 2 major agreements in this period: the bilateral one, which is Vietnam and Japan Economic Partnership Agreement, and the more regional one, which is the ASEAN-Japan Comprehensive Economic Partnership. But in other FTAs, we also have the collaboration. So most importantly, the TPP. In the past, the Trans-Pacific Partnership used to be led by the United States. But after Mr. Donald Trump withdrew the US from the agreement in early 2017, Japan became the coordinator of this process, and Vietnam worked very hard together with Japan in this process. And you may recognize that in 2017, we revived the TPP in another form called the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, or CPTPP at this stage. And the revival of this agreement was completed in November 2017 on the sideline of the APEC summit in Vietnam and under the coordination of Japan. So we work very hard together. And the other one is also the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Japan worked together with ASEAN, including Vietnam, throughout the process. So we started out with the design of this one, whether it should be ASEAN +3 or ASEAN +6. Very important one. But even on the very last stage of it, after India started to withdraw from the agreement, Japan worked very hard together with other stakeholders, including ASEAN and Vietnam, to trying to accelerate the process rather than to have some to make the process with some delay. And the second best practice was the investment cooperation. Japan was among the first investor in Vietnam, but we should also note that Japan became the early investor in various ASEAN member states. And this is why Japanese investor became very important in the role developing the regional production network. They can work with member states, but their view and their strategy is to develop some sort of regional production network where each and every ASEAN member state can work together under the economic linkage, under the cooperation with Japanese investors, and over time, they start to improve the economic linkage. And that is also consistent with the ASEAN view of developing a single production base, which is reflected in the ASEAN economic blueprint. And so, but for Vietnam, there are more important essence than that. The first thing is Japanese investor often entails the long-term approach, which I have to admit that some stakeholders in Vietnam do not like it because they require a lot of time to discuss, to formulate the plan, and to work together with Japanese investor. But once the both sides start to agree to engage, then the relationship start to be very robust and very strong over time. And so the key important impacts of that is the contribution to improving Vietnam's production capacity. And the second part of that is Japanese investors and Vietnamese government agencies remain in close dialogues, and which have identified the areas of investment environment that would need to be addressed. So over the past year, the Japan Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Ce.SI, already worked with Vietnam to address a number of issues related to business environment, related to trade facilitation, also access to electricities and things like that. And Japanese investment will diversify in various ASEAN member states, and this led to the growing share of intermediate goods in intra-ASEAN trade, and that is also important part of it. And the next one is the official development assistance, not only a competitor, not only an economic partner, but Japan also became Vietnam's top donor since the ODA was resumed to Vietnam in 1992. And Japanese ODA contributed to the developing important infrastructure to support socio-economic development in Vietnam, and a number of projects, for example, in terms of the highway connecting Hanoi and major port of Vietnam, and also led to the flows of the goods from Vietnam to across various cities of Vietnam to the export gates. But the other important thing is throughout the development infrastructures, there has been concrete evidence, including my publication, talking about the transfer of technologies and managerial experience from Japanese stakeholders to Vietnamese stakeholders in this process. So it's not just like a contract, it's more like a cooperation between the partners where everyone grows up and everyone learns from each other. And Japan provided ODA in a number of areas, including rather than just those relevant for trade and investment. And these areas include the development of human resource, building and renovation of traffic and electricity infrastructure, improvement, agriculture and rural infrastructure, etc. And Japan's ODA also exhibited some harmonization and coordination with other partners. We work with many partners, but one of the key issues is how to harmonize the technical assistance and development assistance of different donors. And in this regard, Japan was the one that can get together between Vietnam and other donors in order to ensure that the assistance of each and every donors to Vietnam are efficient, not duplicating, but also have some sort of like important role of Vietnam in the process. And finally, the transfer of expertise. We have at the business level, we have the regional production network where the investor from Japan share the business know-how and transfer of technology to Vietnamese stakeholders. But at the policy making level, there are also shared experience from Japan. From 2011 onward, we worked together, and I was part of the team to develop Vietnam's industrialization strategy. And at that time, we have the technical assistance from Japanese stakeholders. We have the membership, former membership of Japanese stakeholders, Japanese embassy, the Japanese Business Association in the process. And together, we developed a 6 action plan to work out in Vietnam in the 6 sectors, including agriculture, machinery, automotive, shipbuilding, food processing, electronics, and environment and energy savings. So, and throughout the process, we learn from the seriousness of Japanese stakeholders in the process. So we have the engagement of different stakeholders. We start step by step to identify the key areas and activities that are relevant for Vietnam, but also offer the interest of investors, which is very important in the process. And finally, talking about further cooperations, I believe that Japan and Vietnam have a lot to work together in the future. And some of the key areas here include the discussion and the shared perspective and experience between Vietnam and Japan in international fora. And the other one is the technical assistance of Japan for Vietnam in improving the institutions, regulations, and policies for green growth after the COVID-19 pandemic. We also need to collaborate to strengthen the sustainable infrastructures and low carbon GVC in Vietnam. And finally, we need to improve the people-to-people connectivity, including by cultural exchange, tourism, and mobility of people. Eventually, this fosters the trust between Vietnamese and Japanese people, which is the key essence for long-term cooperation. So with that, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Very interesting, and we have a lot of food for thoughts in this sense, a lot of insight and reflection. I go to conclude, but before to leave the floor to Dr. Cofelice, I will leave the word to Dr. Marino in order to reply to the suggestion that Dr. Cofelice leave in his previous intervention. Please, Dr. Marino.
So thank you. Again, I hope you hear me. So, in conclusion of the project, I again thank you my colleagues for the presentation. As I tried to explain before, that's what we try to do. So somehow to understand how Japan is acting, what is Japan's strategy toward the region, and what can we learn and what can we try to do better, to develop better, and how can we somehow adapt our strategy. So in conclusion, on the basis of the results of the research that have been presented, we have tried to formulate a series of recommendations in order to improve, but also to structure or to deepen Italy's strategy toward ASEAN, or Italy external action better perhaps toward ASEAN. Because we truly believe that Italy can become a privileged partner of ASEAN for a number of reasons, and now I just refer to what Dr. Cofelice was saying before, perhaps saying that the main strength of Italy in this context can be precisely the Italian non-security oriented approach, which is particularly appreciated in an area that fears becoming somehow, how to say, embroiled in military escalation in the Indo-Pacific. Also, and this is something really important that we take note about it anytime we have the chance and the opportunity to discuss to regional actors. We hear from them about these fears of possible tensions and escalation. So our non-security oriented approach, but also Italy's value-based approach, which is built on balanced win-win partnerships, and this can prove somehow successful in a fast-growing region where states are looking for partners and not for mentors, and this is also something that we oftentimes hear from our partners, Southeast Asian partners. So finally, Southeast Asia can be seen as a relevant alternative for Italy, which for many years perhaps made has focused almost, or let's say almost exclusively on China to develop its economic and trade relations with Asia. Somehow not taking into account the fact that there are regions, broad regions, dynamic, like Southeast Asia, with which we can develop. And in time of the risking, we know, time of shifting, thinking about different strategy, differentiation. So again, we can look at the region with a specific interest. So right now, in order to serve all these purposes, so the research project highlighted the importance of, for instance, coordinating development support actions, not only with local authorities, but also with Italy's international partners, such as Japan. So, because the idea here is to obtain, somehow to achieve better aggregate results. And more importantly, to produce initiatives which are capable of developing effects even beyond the borders of the single nation that Italy can engage. So in this context, the introduction of targeted strategic documents such as action plans aimed, for instance, at sharing practices to support regional small and medium-sized enterprises. It is an option that might be exploited. So the idea here is to develop coherent action over time. In addition, the process of identifying regional forums, also attended by ASEAN member states, and I'm thinking about something specific. For example, Italy joined the Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative recently, after Meloni's visit to India. So this approach, this attitude should continue in order to structure an ongoing presence in the area, which is useful to building up trust. But Italy must also, we believe, be able to identify ongoing regional trends in order to adapt its external action to regional development and not vice versa. And this is like I'm referring to something that perfectly described by our Japanese colleagues. In addition, Italy should focus on developing simple, consistent, and easily applicable engagement tools. So, as our partners suggested us, the multiplication of tools does not facilitate mutual understanding and even harms the development of fruitful relationships. So in general, a successful approach is not limited to a strong coordination of policies and actions between the state and private Italian companies and the realities to be involved, but also includes the involvement of all the stakeholders useful for development of relationships that must certainly be economic, commercial, but also, as Dr. Cofelice was saying before, cultural. And I will touch upon this point in a few seconds. So in our view, Italy should intensify its effort aimed at training the human capital. And this is something that our partners, and also like, so our partners from Japan or from Vietnam, they underline many times. So training human capital. Our colleague, Director Fusanori Iwasaki, was underlining that there is like a lack of high-skilled middle management in the region. And Japan is focusing on this. So we are talking about training, we are talking about education, we are talking about something that we can describe as an Italian excellence. We excel somehow, like we are very good at it in education and training. This is something we can really do. We can help. We can somehow develop something on this point. And this is important because this can help addressing like, somehow technical and managerial skills gaps. So there was something like I wanted to say, because in the intervention of Director Nguyen, also he was underlining like this point. He was stressing at this point the importance of sharing or training in partnership. And this is something on which like Italy should focus for sure. So as for the areas in which to expand cooperation between Italy and ASEAN, there is room for sure to expand partnership in agriculture and agribusiness, which still account for a crucial share of the GDP of ASEAN member states. Again, we're discussing about like something, a sector in which like Italy is among like, let's say Italy is very well the skills here we have like the skills and the experience and the technology that we can share with our partners in Southeast Asia. So Italy can support the ongoing modernization process, offering know-how and expertise, for instance, in producing advanced machinery. So agriculture, agribusiness, advanced machineries, but also I'm thinking about renewable energies. And here I want to share with you briefly somehow an anecdote, a brief story, something that I heard a few years ago. So when from diplomats from Southeast Asia during the G20 in Italy, they were saying to me, oftentimes the West, you always ask us to cut emissions and we agree on it. Just you sometimes forget to share the technology with us. So let's try to learn from this brief story, from this lesson, that like the sharing of technology, of know-how, and training the human capital can help like really the region to grow and prosper. And with the region which is like more developed, like we can also like develop our trade and commercial and cultural links. So this is also like a field in which Italian different approach, I can say, compared to other Asian partners can help. And still, like on energy, I'm thinking about, again, like listening to my colleagues, I thought about this energy efficiency also. This is something that we had a huge energy crisis, like we are facing an energy, we faced an energy crisis, at least like we in Europe, with after the beginning of the war in Ukraine. So we can share our experience, not just on inflation, as like I say it like with a smile, as Director Nguyen was saying, but also like on the field of energy efficiency. So in conclusion, let me just say that, of course, like we should cooperate with our partners, and we talk about Japan, and our project focuses on Japan, but we are part of the European Union. So we should never forget that Italy can also count on the support of the European Union, which represent somehow an exceptional, we can define it as an energies multiplier to promote technical cooperation and, again, capacity building in support of regional institutions and ASEAN states. Because like the main aim of our action in Southeast Asia should be related to the idea also of strengthening regional autonomy. So we should focus on this point and this idea. And then I just conclude mentioning again, like referring to what Dr. Kofelice was saying, cultural exchange. So we know perfectly that Southeast Asia is seen as an important place somehow for tourism, for instance. Also, like tourism is another sector in which like Italy can share its experience with the country, with ASEAN member states. So we know that the region is well known for this, but we should work more like on people-to-people exchange, and also like, again, like on the cultural point of view, we can strengthen like our cooperation. And before we were mentioning, Dr. Kofelice was mentioning archaeological cooperation, for instance, or training or education. These are all fields on which like we should keep working somehow. We should continue to work on these fields, because like it's through this kind of cooperation that these countries can really see and understand what is the Italian approach like to the region, which is like different, and we can play on this like in the next future. Also working together with our partners, Japan on the one hand, European Union on the other hand, South Korea, and so on. So I thank you very much. And
thank you, Dr. Marino. And then, Dr. Kofelice, if you will have something about the conclusion of this conference.
Really, just to thank you, because the expectations were very high at the very beginning of this meeting, and they've been all respected. I am very grateful to all the speakers for having shared with me and with us of the ministry their lessons learned about their cooperation between Japan and Vietnam and ASEAN. So I mean, starting from what was successful and what was less successful, and the challenges that are still there, is very useful for us, because we need really to focus our resources and our efforts towards what I mean has the chance to be realized in a very much sense. So this is very useful for us, and we are going to reflect on this in order to refocus our efforts. And thank you very much also to Dr. Marino, because we received a sort of roadmap on how to improve our relationship with that area, which I will give. I will have the pleasure to share with the colleagues interested in this part of the world. Indeed, especially in terms of cultural cooperation, which is very crucial to the job we are trying to do here, especially recently, because we have set up a sort of, not a sort of, but a real a Director General dealing with cultural exchange and public diplomacy. So the message is that we want to uphold the level of our cultural standing and cultural cooperation with the rest of the world. And this is something where we are investing a lot. So we are going to move toward the direction that you have, I think, that you have mentioned, and both the reports and the presentations were great. So once again, we really thank you, because in operational terms, we received very useful insights and information. So thank you very much for this. This is the sense of our engagement with think tank, to receive both food for thought and operational indication of how to move forward our cooperation with partners. And so this is very important for us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Kofric. Thank you for present your Ce.S.I, because it's also important for us and for Ce.S.I and our partner in this sense to present a good job in this sense. And the report is a very important work for the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but also for the typology of action that the same minister have to present for the future. And in this sense, it is very important that Ce.S.I contribute with a very timely and precise operativity in this sense. Unfortunately, time is tyrant, and we have to conclude, but we have a lot of issues and topics to go in depth. But I hope to have a new opportunity to discuss this topic and maybe also in the future. It was a very interesting discussion, and I would go to conclude and to thank our speaker, Dr. Marino, Dr. Fusanori Iwasaki, and Dr. Nguyen Anh Duong. Thank you for all, and thank you, Italian Minister of Foreign Affairs, for the support. Thank you for all, and see you next time.